And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. Welcome back to the weekly update stream. Been a couple weeks since we've had one of these, but it's no matter. There's plenty to talk about. And for those of you who took a look at the thumbnail for this stream, I'm particularly proud of this one. I just thought it looked particularly good among thumbnails I've made. But as I'm sure you're all aware, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 87 years old, infamous Supreme Court justice, has died. But as always, before we get to that, let's start by talking about where the national debt is and where the Fed's balance sheet is. Well, starting with the Fed's balance sheet, the Fed's balance sheet has now begun to rise. It's now at about 7.1 trillion. Over the past couple of streams, we've talked about how prior to the coronavirus outbreak, it was at about 4 trillion. In the course of a month, or just a couple of months, it shot up all the way to 7 trillion. And since then, it's been steadily sticking around 7 trillion, but it is starting to rise, and we'll talk more about that. The national debt is at currently 26 trillion 779 billion 473 million. And as always, once you hit that 100,000 point, it just keeps rising so fast, it's not even worth trying to say. So almost, if we round up, 26 trillion 800 billion, very quickly approaching that 27 trillion number. And coming up, we'll talk about what what Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has announced this week about the Fed's plans to continue keeping the economy afloat amidst all the economic destruction we've been seeing over the past couple of months. But before we get to that, let's talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Right off the bat, Filthy Night Shift, do you have anything you want to say immediately about the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Before I get into that, there's actually something else that was that caught my interest. Someone pointed out this to me not long ago, and that is that U.S. federal tax revenue, according to us.clock.org, is actually starting to go down. Like, let me see. I have it open in front of me. Let's try to cut down how quickly it goes down.
Okay.
So it's like 4,000 a second. That's how much U.S. federal tax revenue is going down. And I couldn't possibly tell you why, because according to the same website, income tax revenue, payroll tax revenue, and corporate tax revenue are all going up. Tariff tax revenue is going down. However, it's going down much more slowly than U.S. federal tax revenue is. So I couldn't possibly give an explanation. But I find that fairly amusing simply because that, not only is U.S. federal not only is tax revenue used to fund the United States government, but it's also the collateral by which they can borrow money from foreign banks and foreign governments to be able to finance their shenanigans. And if that goes down, it means their collateral goes down, which means that their credit rating is naturally going to have to go up, which means it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot harder for them to borrow. It's going to be a lot more expensive for them to borrow. The interest on the debt is necessarily going to have to increase as a result of this, and this is just increasing the death spiral, or this is just hastening the death spiral of the United States government in terms of its ability to finance itself, which I'm pretty sure you've heard me and Esso talk about in the past. So I really don't need to go into it here, but I think it's just interesting to point out. Now, in regards to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, yeah, my only response to that is good. I don't really have. I know it's a very, I would say, unchristian thing to say, to wish bad things upon people. But in all honesty, I have nothing but contempt for her. Not only insofar as she was just a Supreme Court justice, but also because of her record of hastening the growth and fostering the growth of the state and its victimization of us, the people.
Okay. And I just wanted to add, yes, Darth Vader Ginsburg is finally, the dark judge of the Sith is finally gone. And as happy as that should kind of make me, I actually have a little bit more dread of it, because now there is a Supreme Court seat open, and Trump and the Republicans in the White House, they're going to try to push through a nominee right before the election. And I'm kind of dreading whoever that's going to be, because it's going to be a Trump nominee. And, as bad as Darth Vader Ginsburg was, they're going to be worse, more than likely. So that's what I have to say about it.
All right. Well, I'll say, well, her family is still mourning. I'll refrain from making any celebratory remarks about Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying. I'm just going to state what the facts are. Now, obviously, she was a Supreme Court justice, but what makes her views unique is people often contrasted the views of, let's take another former relatively recently deceased Supreme Court justice, Antonin Scalia. His philosophy as a Supreme Court justice was that it was not his role as a justice to make law or legislate from the bench. It was the role of the Supreme Court to determine what the law said, what the Constitution said, and then apply both equally, whether or not they agreed with what was said. That was the specific role of the Supreme Court, not to make law, merely to interpret the law. And thus, no Supreme Court ruling should result in the actual creation of new law. On the other hand, you had the view of someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who took a loose view of the Constitution. The words of the Constitution have no fixed meaning and, in fact, can evolve over time based on the particular interpretation of the Supreme Court justices. Well, obviously, if the words of the Constitution have no specific meaning and are simply up to whatever the particular Supreme Court justices of the day say they are, that effectively would mean that the United States is ruled by 9 kings who at their own whims decide what the law actually says, what the Constitution actually says, what it actually means at any given time, which would effectively render the other 2 branches of government meaningless. And we can see over the past 30 years, well, even before that, but especially over the past few decades, how the Supreme Court has used its rulings to actually create laws and reinterpret the Constitution so as to increase the power of the state, as Filthy just pointed out there. So in that regard, and seeing as this was in fact the view of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I can't say I have anything positive to say about her at all.
Yeah, likewise. And I think one thing you can say, and this is an interesting comparison you brought up, in regards to Scalia's interpretation versus Ruth Bader Ginsburg's interpretation. Now, there is no way to correctly interpret the Constitution. Even if you were to get James Madison, resurrect him, and get him to explain everything in excruciating detail, then you would still get it wrong because, well, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the trope called Death of the Author.
As in, once the author is dead, it's anyone's guess exactly what he meant, or
no, it's an observation that the creator of a certain work's interpretation of their work is equally as valid as anyone else's. So what that means is that, like, the author doesn't literally die. That's not what that means. It just means that the way that people can interpret the work is so varied that you can come to a theoretically infinite number of conclusions, even if the author's intent is something completely different, and the author's intent is no greater or lesser than anyone else's. To say nothing of the fact that there is no objective way to interpret information. And you can have 2 different people observing the same phenomenon or reading the same text and coming to completely different observations based on their own personal understandings, biases, what have you. And the same thing is going to be with the Constitution. However, the difference between the two is that these 2 observations is that one actually attempts to have an originalist understanding of the Constitution as people like James Madison would have interpreted it. And then you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who takes a more abstract, I would say, understanding of the Constitution, which is to say she doesn't care about the Constitution at all. I've been reading a book called The Vampire Economy about what business was like day to day in 1939 Nazi Germany. And one thing that was very interesting in terms of its observations is that previously in like Weimar Germany and before then, if your business or your property was being victimized by the state, you need only to appeal to the letter of the law, or I should say the quote-unquote law, to be able to reasonably stand a chance of having your case ruled in your favor if what you can verify is being done to you is, according to government legislation, illegal. Whereas what changed in Nazi Germany is that the government can basically do whatever it wants to you, and the only appeal you could possibly get is if you can make the appeal that your business operates according to a very abstract principle of being for the good of the country or the good of the workers. You no longer are able to appeal to written law, but rather just vague abstractions with entirely random and subjective interpretations. And that's what I think what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that's what I think her role in the U.S. Supreme Court was, to try not to judge to see if something was quote unquote unconstitutional or not, which, by the way, just to clarify, there is no objective way of anything possibly being constitutional or not. But you can at least appeal to the Constitution in some way to hopefully get something ruled in your case. But rather, you're just meant to, what Ruth Bader Ginsburg's philosophy was, does this appeal to my sensibilities? Does it make my fees feel better?
All right, just quickly, Brocron0, thank you very much for the super chat. You say long time no see, my 2 cents. And yes, I'm aware we haven't had the stream for a couple weeks, so it is good to be back. In any case, moving beyond, now on that the point of the death of the author that Filthy just brought up, I think there is a legitimate debate to be had there about whether or not there is in any particular text has an objective meaning. But either way, what is absolutely true is that any particular individual can come up with their own meaning, and when you have a body like the Supreme Court, where these 9 individuals have been entrusted on deciding what it means, inevitably, you get someone like Ginsburg who instead of looking back to what the original authors probably meant or holding that originalist view, do blatantly, as she said and as Filthy just enumerated, decide it means what I say it means, whether because it's in accordance with what I want. But what Night Shift talked about is, of course, this now perhaps the bigger news story is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg allegedly on her deathbed had a final wish. Her final wish being do not nominate a new Supreme Court justice until after the November 2020 election. Well, obviously, the Trump administration has a vested interest in getting a new nominee in as quickly as they can because it would certainly appeal to his base. On the other hand, the Democratic Party has a vested interest in not getting a nominee in until after the 2020 election, with the hopes, of course, that that Biden wins the election, and then then it would be Harris deciding who comes in. Because let's face it, Biden has proven over the last couple of weeks he does not have a brain cell left to decide who the next Supreme Court nominee would be. But interestingly enough, there are already plenty of groups coming out announcing that if Donald Trump, among them, of course, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and a number of these other radical left-wing groups are not at all shy to point out that if Donald Trump tries to push through a new nominee before the 2020 election, they will cause havoc in the streets and increase the amount of arson and looting and rioting we've seen over the past couple of weeks. So really, at this point, I don't see any possible way forward towards the 2020 election or beyond that doesn't involve more rioting, more destruction, and, of course, more doting on it by the mainstream media.
Hey, my 2 cents, I just posted a thing in the group chat, and I was hoping you could play the audio on stream.
Okay.
Just be aware that there is profanity in it.
Okay, I honestly, I'm not. Let me see if I can play it. I've always had trouble. I know there's a way to do it. I've had trouble playing audio through a stream. I can screen share, but playing audio. Let's see. This media could not be played. Okay.
Well,
not sure what to say about that.
Crap.
I mean, the whole point is just like it's just a video of some crazy woman in her car who just learned that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and she just completely throws a tantrum.
Oh yeah, the TikTok thing.
Yeah, it is phenomenal.
TikTok, which of course that's another news story in and of itself. All right, well, you can go ahead and post the link in the main chat on the stream if you want, and everyone can check that out for themselves. Of course, the TikTok ban has come back in the news. That's another story all in itself. But the point being, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg is yet another catalyst to increase for the neo-Marxist left to create more rioting and destruction to overthrow the current system that they are becoming more and more vocal about.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Next thing I would like to discuss is the what currently is going on with the economy. Now, obviously, Donald Trump is. Before we jump into that, I presume everyone else is starting to see as they're watching YouTube or streaming services or whatever the case may be. There are a lot more campaign ads now.
We're getting up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, what I've been seeing more of is just get out and vote.
That too. But what I will see is if you look at Donald Trump's campaign ads compared to Joe Biden's ads, and it makes sense that these would be the narratives, but Donald Trump is running with the narrative that he has created the strongest economy ever. It was hit hard by COVID, but thanks to his amazing efforts, the economy is growing and we're stronger than ever. Biden, of course, is running with the narrative that Donald Trump created the COVID problem and more jobs have been destroyed under his presidency than any other. And he actually has one ad where he shows the amount of jobs created under Reagan, the amount created under Bush, the amount created under Clinton, Bush, Obama, and then Trump. It's negative amount of jobs. And he's like, is this really what you want? And that all makes sense. But what exactly is going on with the economy? Well, one way to answer the question, we've talked about this on quite a few streams, is to look at what exactly the Fed is trying to do. Well, ever since this crisis, interest rates were already at record lows before this crisis even. Of course, ever since the COVID crisis popped off, the Fed basically slashed rates to zero and promised to do so to keep buying up assets with newly created money to keep the economy afloat amidst this crisis. Well, this Wednesday in particular at a press conference, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell fielded a number of questions from reporters about where we are in the economy. And Powell has answered that the Fed has pledged that it will keep rates at near zero up until at least 2023. And as we talked about on a previous stream before, it is going to allow inflation to rise above 2% for, quote, some time. Now, it's been appropriately said there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. But as you can see, the Fed is basically saying, at this point, we're just going to keep printing money nonstop. Whatever money the government needs, we'll print it. Whenever a company is going to go under, we'll bail it out. And we'll do whatever it takes to keep stock prices looking like they're high so that even though an additional 12 million people are still unemployed, and I think this week, actually, hang on, let me look up. I've got it here.
Keep that money printer going, burr.
Yep. There are currently 12 million Americans currently collecting unemployment checks. Yeah. And this past week, an additional 800,000 workers filed new unemployment claims. As of the end of August, 30 to 40 million Americans are at risk of eviction. Of course, Donald Trump has promised that landlords are not actually allowed to evict. But that means we've got 30 to 40 million Americans not paying their rent or mortgages, and landlords and banks not able to collect the money that they're counting on. So at this point, if you think the economy is doing well and or recovering, you have to be delusional at this point. And the Fed has basically announced that it's not going to stop, which is interesting considering if you go back to the Great Depression, there came a point in 1929 where the Fed realized it couldn't print money forever without debasing the currency to the point that it would become worthless. So they basically hit the brakes on the money printers and let the economy collapse. Now, at this point, it's unclear. Even if they let the economy collapse right now, it's doubtful the U.S. dollar could ever recover. But they are going with the method of we're just going to go until this collapses. And again, I don't presume to be able to predict exactly when it will collapse, but as the longer they manage to push it off, the harder the collapse is going to be, and as the worse it's going to be.
Yeah,
I mean the main reason that the dollar value is propped up is because of OPEC and petrodollar recycling, which I don't think I need to go into detail because you guys understand it. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely, we've talked about it several times.
Yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, fact of the matter is, like, the dollar should have collapsed a long time ago. But because we have petrodollar recycling and say, well, you're able to artificially increase demand, thus making sure that there's not too much supply in any one place. However, China and Russia are de-dollarizing. The OPEC is on the verge of collapse. and the U.S. money printer has just been nonstop going brrr.
Yep.
And make it even worse, like this is probably the first time in history that the money printer has been going brrr throughout an entire recession. So fact of the matter is, like, they need to keep the money printer going just to stop it from being worse than it already is. So this is arguably what the prelude to something even worse, because what happens when the actual crash comes? What happens when the everything bubble bursts?
And I'm sharing a screenshot of this article from the Financial Times saying investors vent frustration over Fed's balance sheet inertia. For those that want to take a look at the article, I highly recommend it. But this is one of several articles that I think basically shows that more and more people are opening their eyes to the fact that the Fed can't fix the problem. If you see here, this is shows the Fed's balance sheet since December of 2017. We see that although it was slightly declining around January of 2019, it started even prior to the COVID breakout. It was starting to climb again here around January 2020. Of course, February COVID hits, whoosh, goes all the way up to 7 trillion. It dropped a little bit. It stalled, but as I said at the beginning of the stream, it's starting to climb again. And more people are wising up to realize the Fed is playing a game they can't win, and investors are catching wind. Once enough investors finally lose faith and start pulling their investments, there's nothing the Fed's going to be able to do to stop it.
And looks like you got a super chat as well.
Yes, Brocon 0, you got another $1.99. Thank you. Do you remember SirCon? My 2 cents. I can't say I do. You'll have to refresh my memory.
Sir Conservatarian.
Oh, yes. Actually, I do. It's been a while, but yes.
Yeah, he's actually been pretty active in the back alley Discord server. I talk to him like every other day, and yeah. So if you recall, like, do you remember what happened to him? I know what happened, but I'm asking if you recall.
I don't. It's been, several years at this point since I've been on one of his streams.
All right. So basically what happened is that he joined the Navy, and, well, he hates it. Like, really, really, really hates it. He's doing everything he can to possibly get out. I know he's going for a medical discharge right now, which hopefully he'll be able to get, because I know that he has just been suffering. He's been diagnosed with multiple mental disorders that he didn't previously even have. He's it's been very unpleasant. And yeah, he's also trying to help get other people out of the Navy as well. Also, another thing, he's anarchist now.
Oh, good.
Okay, which he was not the last time we spoke. So
yeah, he was not. Yeah,
I'm sorry to hear about that. I hope his situation. I hope he's able to resolve his situation.
Oh yeah, I think everyone is. But yeah, if you want to say hi to him, you can jump into the back alley server, and yeah, he's usually on a voice chat when we do voice chats.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Night Shift.
Well, and I just wanted to add this. Do you think that the Fed might possibly be banking on potentially a second civil war starting up to kind of bail them out of this whole thing? I mean, to kind of shift the eyes off of them and more onto the conflict. Do you think that they're waiting for something like that to start, or?
Well, as I've said on previous streams, my initial thoughts were that the Fed knows, and basically anyone who's trained in economics has to know what's coming. They're obviously not going to be honest about it, given it would collapse the economy faster. My initial thought had been that when the dollar collapsed, the Fed was looking to institute Fed coin, and basically when the dollar collapsed, as they know it would, they'd use it as an opportunity to save the economy by rolling out Fed coin and offering everybody a digital wallet and their stimulus checks via Fed coin, which very well may still be their strategy. Although admittedly, I'm not so sure that's exactly what they're going for anymore. But I think that possibly could be what they're planning to do.
Listen, here's what I think is going to happen. So we're already seeing rumblings of that in terms of the coin shortage. But one thing I think they're going to be doing is the next round of bailouts, which I couldn't tell you when that's going to be, but I'm pretty sure that they are going to try to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to offer stimulus packages, but they'll be entirely conditional on you having a FedCoin account, or the assets will be distributed entirely digitally, which will basically require you to open some kind of FedCoin account or do something to register with them so that you're able to receive the money. And once you have a FedCoin account, well, it'll be a lot easier for them to distribute some kind of FedCoin payments processing system so that all the businesses that do accept FedCoin, because they need to in order to stay afloat, will start to have some kind of digital payment processing system. And this will be easier to make that essentially the new currency of the United States. We'll probably even try to create some parallel currency with the dollar that already exists. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a way to like one-to-one transition or transition your dollars into FedCoin and vice versa. Though I imagine transferring FedCoin into dollars will be very difficult, or into cash, because they are generally trying to move the economy away from cash. So that's what I think they're going to be doing. They're not going to mandate it. They're just going to make it so the only way you can get federal dollars is through FedCoin.
Inevitably, in the face of other cryptocurrencies, it's going to fail more than likely. Or no, actually not more than likely. It will fail, though, honestly.
Oh, I mean, I can assure you it's going to do a lot worse than fail.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to the next topic for this week. Everybody here probably remembers this name, but although some of you may be aware, my guess is you've not seen it on any of the mainstream media web pages. You have to dig to find this. But everyone remembers Julian Assange, of course, the founder of the website WikiLeaks, who is currently being held in the United Kingdom. And of course, the United States has asked to extradite him in order to charge him. Well, Julian Assange has not been able to go to court for quite some time now, of course, due to COVID restrictions. Courts have been shut down, waiting until such a time that they can be appropriately opened up. Well, unbeknownst to many, the trials of Julian Assange resumed this week. He is currently they're determining whether or not he will be extradited to the United States to face 18 counts of espionage and computer misuse charges that carry with them a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Now, if you get on Google and Google Julian Assange right now and look for the top news stories, what you'll actually see is that most of the news stories are not, in fact, about the actual trial he's undergoing in the UK, though, but they are assertions that the Trump administration has offered him a pardon if he will just come out and provide evidence from where he received several emails that he leaked, formally declaring that he did not receive them from the Russian government, and thereby bolster the Trump campaign's assertion that the Russians had little to nothing to do with Donald Trump's election in 2016. So at least
it was Seth Rich.
Indeed. But my point being that it's one, most people are unaware that he's actually undergoing trials right now, and two, if you Google his name, the primary news stories don't actually talk about the trial. They talk about Donald Trump allegedly offering him a pardon in exchange for information.
Yeah. Now, that story, from what I've heard, two people claiming to represent the Trump administration offering Julian Assange a pardon if he tells them that glows to me, and not in a sense of a state sort of way, but just like it doesn't seem truthful. It sounds like it's a bunch of operatives who are claiming, I don't know who they actually would be working for, but that whole thing just incredibly suspicious to me, because I mean, WikiLeaks said from like very early on, even before Trump was elected president, that it was not the Russians, that was not their source. They didn't say who it was, but they just came out with a statement on Twitter, I think, where they just straight up said it was not the Russians. Now, they don't usually do that. So I don't see why WikiLeaks would have any reason to lie about that kind of thing. So I'm willing to take them at their word. That said, though, this whole thing it just seems very strange. WikiLeaks or Julian Assange giving him information that he might not even have. about something that is blatantly obvious to anyone with even like a minute of research would find out that it was clearly not the Russians who did that. I mean, I think, although we don't have any sources that confirm this, we all know it was Seth Rich, that Democratic National Committee operative who shot himself in the back of the head in a tragic weightlifting accident. We all know it was him. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And I'm reasonably sure Seth Rich doesn't work for the Russians either, or didn't work for the Russians.
Right.
Now, it is interesting that it's also it was recently that the Supreme Court has finally ruled that a while back, a guy named Edward Snowden, also a whistleblower, revealed that the NSA was illegally gathering the metadata of all of U.S. citizens. And of course, Snowden was then branded a traitor, forced to flee to Russia to avoid prosecution. Now, recently, the Supreme Court has ruled that Snowden was in fact correct. The NSA's metadata collection program is unconstitutional and illegal. Of course, Snowden remains a fugitive from justice, and I don't know of any government officials who have been prosecuted for their illegal metadata collection program. But it just goes to show that people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden expose the government for breaking its own laws, and they are the ones who are branded traitors and criminals and face lifetime in prison or worse. And even when, in a case like Snowden's, the Supreme Court rules that, actually, guys, Snowden was right. What the NSA was doing was, in fact, illegal and unconstitutional. He's nonetheless branded a traitor. And although there have been rumors that President Trump was going to pardon Edward Snowden and or Julian Assange, he has made no formal statement to that effect, and I seriously doubt that will ever happen.
I mean, I wouldn't be upset if it happened, but I mean, I do have to take issue with some terminology we used, and that is that Snowden is a fugitive from justice.
Okay. Well, he's a fugitive from the U.S. government. Whether he's a fugitive from justice is an entirely different matter.
I mean, Edward Snowden did nothing wrong, so if anything, he's a fugitive from injustice.
Yeah.
But
absolutely fair point there.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense what the U.S. government is trying to do. They're not only burying the story because they don't want people to know about it. The U.S. government is definitely aware of something called the Streisand effect, which basically points out that if you tell a kid, no, do not do this, then they'd have a greater interest in what it is that you're trying to stop them from doing. A good example would be you actually make heavy metal more appealing to young people and teenagers by putting a parental advisory notice on the album covers.
Yeah.
It makes it look cooler, edgier, and generally more appealing. And so this is what they did by having the Snowden trial just buried in the news. It's not covered in the New York Times. It's not covered in the Washington Post. It's not covered in the Guardian. I think the Daily Mail did like some very small article about it, just briefly mentioning it. But overall, it's just been absolutely buried in memory hold. They want people to wake up one morning and just be like, wait, this happened to Julian Assange? Because let's be honest here, people who actually know anything about Julian Assange and don't just have some kind of like visceral Fox News reaction like, oh, he's a bad guy. The government just do whatever they want with them. Then they know that Julian Assange not only did nothing wrong, but did a very useful public service by, as you said earlier, exposing government criminality, government lies, and government coercion in addition to corporate lies, corporate coercion, and corporate power. I mean, keep in mind that WikiLeaks doesn't just go after governments; it also goes after big business and anyone who's basically trying to keep secrets. So with this in mind, it makes total sense that the United States government would try to bury this as much as possible, try to keep people in the dark and not knowing what's going on. And keep in mind that the reason that the extradition to the U.S. is important is because what the U.S. government wants to do is prosecute him under the Espionage Act, which is a 1917 piece of legislation, as in something that's like over 100, or that is 103 years old, which was passed into legislation specifically to stop American journalists from being honest about World War One. It is arguably one of the main reasons that World War One is so nebulous in terms of its causes in the first place, because of just the amount of censorship that goes on. And under the Espionage Act, if you engage in basically journalism, then you are going to be prosecuted as an enemy agent, engaging in subversion against the United States government, and they can just basically throw the book at you, which is very much going to be a warning shot, going to be used as an example to any other people who might otherwise be engaged in journalism. Not only to mainstream media people who might arguably, or who might actually be engaged in journalism, but also independent people who want to go out and try to figure out what the truth is for themselves. That you might be the next Julian Assange. And if you're the next Julian Assange, that basically means the US government is going to throw you in jail for the rest of your life. And you don't want that, do you? Keep in mind that mainstream media in the United States, and I imagine the same is absolutely true in the UK, they're basically all government operatives, CIA assets, people who value their access, their ability to get information from their sources inside the government, than they do actually figuring out the truth. And as such, their very careers are entirely dependent on maintaining and furthering the interests of the state. And it goes without saying that if the state wants someone to be unpersoned, then the media is going to be just going to happily go along with it.
In principle, it's not that different from the Chinese Communist Party's laws that make it illegal to criticize the Chinese Communist Party. And of course, everyone's willing to condemn that as awful. But really, in principle, it's not that different from what's going on here. People like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden do the ultimate form of criticism of government by pointing out government hypocrisy and it breaking its own laws. And they go on to sentence you to a triple life sentence in horrible conditions as a warning to anyone else. You'd better not expose us again, or else what we did to them will do worse to you.
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I kind of have an opposite perspective of this. I could almost see President Trump pardoning Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, if only because we are in an election year right now. And it would go a long way for Trump, if he could say, I was the guy who pardoned these people. I was the guy who did this. I'm letting them go. Aren't I just a great president? You should vote for me. It seems like he might do that based on just it being an election year, and maybe he's trying to buy votes from people, from different people. But that's really the only way I could see him doing that, and not just condemning them and throwing the book at them.
Well, I think you're correct that if Trump legitimately believed pardoning them would boost his chances of getting reelected, he'd have a direct incentive to do so. Wouldn't change the fact that the deep state still would has a extreme vested interest in that not happening. The question would be who has more push when push comes to shove. I think it still would be the deep state, although, I don't know. How far would they be willing to go to make sure Trump doesn't do that?
I don't believe the deep state actually exists. I think the deep state is just another one of these narratives that is pushed forward by one faction in the political arena, specifically to manipulate people into thinking that the government does work in your interests. It's just these bad actors, these bad people in the state that need to go away. If they go away and we get good people in there, then the state will be great and wonderful and perfect, I promise. And you can see this with other narratives too. You have the deep state, the neoliberals, the swamp, all of these basic ideas that if we just get rid of the bad actors, then everything's going to be great and wonderful and perfect, I promise. When in fact the state is very much is existentially always going to victimize people. That's just its nature. And assuming that just getting rid of bad actors or bad people is going to fix that just doesn't make any sense to me. But in regards to what you were talking about earlier with what the intelligence is going to do, even if they do get pardons, I'm absolutely certain that Snowden and Assange can never step foot in the United States for the rest of their life, because otherwise they will, as I said earlier, shoot themselves in the back of the head in tragic weightlifting accidents.
Yeah, fall down an elevator shaft onto some bullets. Yeah, more than likely that would be the case.
And now I would agree with you, Filthy, that it is the deep state narrative is used as to try and by hardcore Trump supporters and others who would say that, yes, if only we can get rid of bad actors in the state would be good. And I agree that's false. I still would agree it is nonetheless the case that there are different factions seeking to control the state, even though none of them are good guys.
Oh yeah, I don't discount that at all. Every single government agency is seeking to increase their own wealth and increase their own budgets, often at the expense of other agencies. So you can imagine that there is significant rivalry between them on this. In addition to, well, you have the Republicans and Democrats. Sure, they both completely agree in increasing the size and power of the state and increasing its victimization on our lives. That is absolutely true. But both of them have their own sets of marginal preferences that they wish to seek achieved that oftentimes are mutually exclusive with that of their opponents. And as such, I think a large part of the coup narratives that we've been seeing going around the media are really just misrepresentations of what I would characterize as a more civilized version of the civil wars that used to characterize the late stage Roman Empire. I don't know if does that make sense?
Say the last part one more time.
I was talking about how the Roman Empire in its late stage was constantly engaged in civil wars as senators/generals would constantly bring their personal legions against each other for the purpose of trying to seize the throne of Caesar for themselves.
All the while, the empire was still dying. Yep, I would say yes, there are many parallels there.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I think is going on today. The Roman Empire, for various reasons, was insanely brutal and sadistic. But nowadays, it's a bit more civilized in the extent to which they use diplomacy, duplicity, and trickery in order to try to gain or try to attain and seize power, try to gain and seize legitimacy. I genuinely don't think that their attempts to appeal to the masses has anything to do with them actually getting votes, because elections don't actually matter. I think what they're just trying to do is try to make sure that their little faction of the state is able to achieve legitimacy, or is able to gain a perception of legitimacy, such that their opponents, if they were to seize power, it would be socially unacceptable for them to do so. So that's what I think is like really going on.
All right. Well, we're at about 42 minutes in the stream. This is earlier than we usually get to, although that was the extent of the amount of news stories I had for this stream. If anyone in the chat has something they want us to discuss, feel free to bring it up. And if you guys had anything additional you want to discuss, by all means, we still have plenty of time.
Oh, yeah. There's actually something I posted 10 days ago about Quebec City, saying this comes from Zero Hedge, saying that they will isolate uncooperative citizens in secret corona facility. Authorities in Quebec City, Canada, have announced they will isolate uncooperative citizens in a coronavirus facility, the location of which remains a secret. During a press conference, Dr. Jacques Girard, who leads the Quebec City Public Health Authority, drew attention to a case where patrons at a bar were ordered to wait until their COVID-19 tests came back, but disregarded the command and left the premises before the results came back positive. This led to them being deemed uncooperative and forcibly interned in a quarantine facility. We may isolate someone for 14 days, Girard said during a press conference, and that is what we did this morning. Forced a person to cooperate with the investigation, and police cooperation was exceptional. So that's basically what's going on in, I don't know, what would you call Canada? Airstrip 2?
Guess so.
And yeah, that's what's happening, at least in one of the cities. Now, granted, it's known that Quebec is known to be one of the more authoritarian counties in Canada, and Quebec City is especially so. So it kind of makes sense that would be happening there, of all places. However, it does showcase the extent to which your rights end where our fifis begin in regards to how the authoritarian state regards your individual liberty and your rights. That you can be held in a location against your will, and failure to abide by their arbitrary dictates. Who even gave that order in the first place is not even listed. I imagine it's some nobody cockroach said that they had to be there. And the moment they said, like, no, screw you, I'm going home, which is entirely within their rights to do so, they're listed as uncooperative, kidnapped, and locked away, all for the crime of not being quote-unquote cooperative. In other words, failing to abide by their forced association mandate.
It's been a while since I watched this movie, but has everyone here seen V for Vendetta?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been as of late thinking about that in light of like the story that Filthy just touched on, or I'm sure many of you have probably heard of the mother in the Victoria province of Australia. State, I'm not sure what they call it, Victoria, the region, whatever that municipality is called, where she posted a Facebook post and got her arrested because the government claimed she was trying to incite protest against coronavirus lockdowns.
Well, but it's getting your first mistake.
It's getting to the point where the state will openly say, we will keep you safe, but we demand total allegiance. You don't question us. You do what we say all the time. It's like whatever the supreme leader of the UK is called in V for Vendetta there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We need your cooperation.
Well, no, they don't need your cooperation. They demand your obedience. I know that's a movie, but I know it's fiction, but still, it's kind of interesting to observe how they try to frame the mandates as well. The way it was written in this, and not really written, but just like what Gerard said, is that they forced a person to cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
which
cooperation typically involves. It is a contradiction in terms. Cooperate typically involves voluntarily agreeing with someone else's suggestions. You're cooperating with them. You're working with them. Whereas if you're forcing a person to cooperate, that's not really cooperation, is it? And also notice that police cooperation was exceptional as well, as though there was ever going to be any controversy at all at what the cockroaches were going to do. I mean, I think I've seen studies that show that if ordered to fire upon their neighbors, like 80 to 90% of cops would open fire. So yeah. Mm-hmm. They are not going to operate in your interests. They don't care about you. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that they hate you. They hate the fact that you have autonomy, that you're not just some mindless drone that they can just push around and like just some mindless piece on a chessboard as part of their grand system, their grand design. And as such, they want to dehumanize you, reduce your humanity, make you something less than human. And if they can do that, then they can basically just make you do whatever they want. It's insidious. It's horrible. It's evil.
Yeah. And it's amazing how accurate V for Vendetta is becoming. And, even more frightening, the year that it was supposed to take place was actually the year in the movie. It's like 2020 is actually the year. And it's amazing how accurate it was actually, how much of it's coming true, because I mean the police state in the UK rose in the wake of a killer virus that everyone was afraid of, and so everyone just kind of complied out of fear, and they gave away their freedoms out of fear of the virus. And lo and behold, this tyrannical government comes up with apparently the solution. The only solution is to basically lock everyone down and to oppress everyone. And that never went away. That always stayed there. And so, yeah, V for Vendetta, I would definitely say, is kind of frighteningly accurate at what is happening right now.
I mean, the general observation I think it tried to make is, well, there's made a lot of observations, but one of the things I notice is that every single totalitarian regime that exists, every authoritarian regime, is always going to justify itself on the basis of some external threat. Mm-hmm. The Nazis were afraid of the Jews. The Soviets, especially under Stalin, were afraid of the fascists. The Nosefire regime was afraid of the virus. The United States is afraid of the Russians nowadays.
Before that, it was terrorism.
Yeah.
Before that, it was terrorism. Now it's a virus again.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Oceania regime in 1984, they were afraid of one of the other two superpowers,
Yep.
who was always going to be a threat until they weren't a threat. Then they were always their friends. So the reason they do that is of course, is that if people genuinely are anxious about the threat and they see the state as not only their insulation from the threat, but the way to alleviate that anxiety, then they're going to see it as essential to not only their own survival, but also to their interests. And they're going to be completely willing to accept a bias that allows them to overlook the extent to which the state is a greater threat to them than the external threat actually is. Now, sometimes that external threat is legitimately a threat of its own because it is also a state, but it's the point I'm trying to make is that people are willing to overlook some of the problems in their insulation from it. The insulation from the threat, I mean.
If anyone watching has not actually seen the movie, I encourage you, search on YouTube, watch V's speech that he gives, that he broadcasts on the national propaganda channel in that movie, in which he opens his speech saying, "I'm sure as we speak, people are screaming into telephones saying, 'Get him off the air,' and men with guns are on their way. But you can't stop words because words carry truth." And he basically blames the British people, not the authoritarians, for the situation they're in saying, "You didn't stand up for your rights, and now you lost them." So, great movie. Honestly, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. But I think that is very profound in that if people won't stand up for their rights, they'll simply give them up in the name of safety, and then one day wake up and they're living under a totalitarian regime.
Yep.
I have a problem with people just saying stand up for your rights, because that's a very abstract argument that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't describe anything. What actionable steps does one take to stand up for their rights? One could easily take that to mean, oh, just wait until election day and then vote, even though not only is voting incredibly ineffective, but it also coerces people into conflating their interests with that of whatever politicians are being elected. So it's not very effective. Protesting, we know, is not particularly effective. So what does stand up for your rights mean?
Right.
All right. Well, I guess that's a fair point to make. Merely saying stand up for your rights, if not expounded upon, isn't particularly helpful. But in that refuse to go along with what the point he's making, that people willingly allowed the government to take their rights away. They didn't say, "No, we won't stand for this. You're not taking our freedoms away. And if you try to, we'll stop you." And in particular, it goes to show the importance of having a population being armed and not giving up your right to own a firearm, because that's when it comes down to it, standing up for your rights. Although violent revolution isn't the answer, when the state will inevitably attempt to use force if you don't cooperate. And what really depends on what really going to draw the line between people with the means to resist and the people without the means to resist are whether or not you're armed and able to protect yourself. All right. Well, on that point, we are moving towards. We're getting pretty close to the top of the hour here. I'll take a quick look at the.
You just got a super chat.
Oh yeah, we did just get a super chat. Heat Bombastic, thank you very much. Could y'all give me a pep talk to help me not give in to mask bootlickers and vooters? I keep getting shamed by family, coworkers, strangers, and hell, the media and ads. Social pressure is real.
I'm going to make this very simple. Those people do not have your interests at heart. What they're trying to do is they're trying to insulate themselves from their own insecurities and their own questioning. When they were younger, what happened is that they realized that a big chunk of the narratives that they were force-fed through government education as well as their own parents was absolute bullcrap. They were punished. They were humiliated. They were shamed. They were generally made to feel anxious, afraid, scared, and the kind of emotions that you're experiencing right now are something that they experienced. So in order to avoid that, they cooperated, they bent the knee, they complied, they did everything that they wanted them to do, and as such, it helped make the shame go away. It did actually have that effect. But they still have this internalized shame that they once held those opinions, that they once held those beliefs, and that they otherwise might have not been able to comply with it. That's why they're so upset at you, because they're externalizing their own shame onto you, and they're trying to make you feel the same way that they did back in that day. So what's going on right there is nothing. What's going on with you is hardly anything special, but they find your courage terrifying. They find the opinions that you're espousing experiencing the same anxiety that they felt when they were in your position decades ago. So with this in mind, like, yeah, by all means, they deserve to feel anxious. They deserve to feel insecure. They deserve to melt in the face of true courage and true integrity. Do not give in to these masked bootlickers. They do not have your interests at heart. They just want you to comply. They want you to conform. They want you to be something that you're not. So don't even think about that. And as for voting, I mean, I think you're well aware, because I've seen you in the back alley before, that voting doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. The probability that your vote is actually going to change anything is virtually non-existent, and it has never been demonstrated to actually make a difference at any point, despite numerous studies attempting to prove this. Furthermore, we already know that all voting does is cause you to internalize the state, specifically voting for certain politicians, as the means by which your interests can be met. It means that it turns your ideas and your own praxis as to how to achieve a stateless society into a system where you believe murderers called politicians can be used to abolish politics, that bureaucrats will eliminate bureaucracy, or that judges will eliminate the judicial monopoly. So it goes without saying, yeah, don't give in. Do not give in, because if you surrender your integrity, honestly, I would say integrity is probably one of the most important things a person can have. If you give that up, you lose yourself. You lose everything.
Yeah.
And if your family, if strangers, if your coworkers don't like it, if those media and ads don't like it either, then screw them. Who cares what they think? They don't have your best interest at heart.
I'm going to read here a quote from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, in particular, in reference to the 31st Law of Power, control the options and get others to play with the cards you deal with. Quote, the best deceptions are the ones that seem to give the other person a choice. Your victims feel they are in control, but are actually your puppets. Give people options that come out in your favor, whichever one they choose. Force them to make choices between the lesser of two evils, both of which serve your purpose. Put them on the horns of a dilemma. They are gored wherever they turn. End quote. I'm just saying that in the point of voting, in that is exactly what voting government elections are. Giving people the illusion that they are in control, when in reality, both choices end up being a win for the states. And I've got an article on my website, my2centsvideos.com, called Why Government Elections Are a Farce, that basically goes through the entire history of the United States government, shows that it doesn't matter who controls the White House, doesn't matter who controls Congress, two things happen under every administration. The spending goes up, and the government grows in the size and scope of its authority. So for those people that say you can make a difference through voting, you need to vote, you have an obligation to vote, they're just flat out wrong. And seeing as they are, there's no reason to take their shaming to heart.
There is a choice you can make in regards to voting that actually does make a difference, and makes a difference significantly larger than anyone can realize, and that is the choice to not vote. All you have to do on November 3rd, 2020 is do nothing. Me, Esso, and Asia are going to be doing an election day stream where we'll just be playing video games all day, or throughout the entirety of the election. We'll just be hanging out, doing all sorts of really dumb stuff. And that's basically all we'll be doing. The choice to not vote is a choice to not comply, to not go along, to not give your consent to to these liars, thieves, kidnappers, and murderers that you recognize what they're doing is legitimate. And it does not, and it's a affirmation that you do not give any murderer the mandate to enact any legislative proposal or agenda that they might otherwise seek to enact. So that's what you should be doing this November. Don't vote, because it's the only choice that you can possibly make that matters.
All right, Brocron0 has another super chat. I look forward to speaking to you again, my 2 cents, and I look forward to talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, we have reached the top of the hour. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Filthy, Night Shift, great stream as always, and I'm sure there'll be more to talk about next week. So, as always, that is my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth.
Bye.